Welcome to AI for You. Today's use case is about vibe coding custom tools to solve problems specific to your campus. Instead of searching for an off the shelf product that does a million things plus the one thing you actually need, or waiting months for a vendor to build you a custom solution, you can use AI coding tools to build exactly what you need in an afternoon. First, identify a workflow bottleneck, something repetitive, manual, or frustrating that your team deals with regularly. Maybe it's a unique process for assigning courses to rooms, or a form that requires pulling data from multiple systems, or a task where someone is spending hours on data entry that could be automated. Then open up a tool like Claude Code, Cursor, Replit, or even just Claude or ChatGPT and describe the problem in plain language. Tell it what the inputs are, what the outputs should be, and who will be using it. The more specific you are about the workflow and the users, the better the results. You don't need to be a developer. These tools are conversational enough that you can iterate back and forth until you have something that works. The key mindset shift here is to stop thinking, what tool can I buy to solve this? And start thinking, what problem do I have? And then just build the solution. As always, the full prompt is in the show notes. Today, I have the pleasure of talking with Sean Harrington. Sean is the director of the AI and Legal Tech Studio at the Sandra Day O'Connor College of Law at Arizona State University. He teaches AI in the practice of law. He runs an innovation studio where students build real tools, and he's a passionate advocate for getting institutions to move faster on AI adoption. ASU has been a leader in this space, and Sean has a unique perspective on everything from vibe coding campus to solutions to rethinking admissions and governance in the age of AI. Let's jump right in. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Sean.
Excited to be here. This is really looking forward to it.
You've been using AI for a while. When did AI kind of switch from something that you were hearing about and playing with maybe to something that was really relevant to you?
I mean, so the ChatGPT moment was big. As soon as you used it in that interface, you saw, man, this could be in a lot of other interfaces like legal research databases, the interfaces that attorneys sit in all day long. I was like, oh, this is going to be real big. Prior to that, I'm kind of a science fiction nerd. So I'd read Bostrom's book in 2014 and I had watched all the AlphaGo stuff of it beating people. Like specifically, there was a video game that I play, and when it started to beat people on that, I was like, oh, that's interesting. But I didn't see it as much of a work tool. And it's in this nice browser interface. You could easily see it in your phone. I mean, all of a sudden it's like, oh yeah, this is kind of going to be in everything.
What are some of the ways that you're currently using it at work?
So I teach an AI in the practice of law class, and then I run the AI and legal tech studio. So I use it kind of all day, just for administrative stuff, because there's so much like repeatable work when you work at a university where you're filling out the same form over and over again, things like that. But I also teach it in class. Lawyers are using it in all of their platforms, and that's what my class does, is show you how to use it in legal research, how to use it in drafting, how to use it in administrative processes like billing. So kind of everywhere now, and I use it at home. So I develop at home. I build apps. My wife and I built a little like home billing app that so she could track our finances. She does our accounting. And I was one of those guys that immediately ran out and bought the Mac Mini for OpenClaw. So I'm cracked. I'm doing this all day long.
That's awesome. So I love the fact that as you teach, you're working with students who I'm sure oftentimes have hesitancy about using AI. I know in a lot of institutions, there's specific rules that you can't use AI in a lot of classes. And then, of course, just working with lawyers, working with other people on the staff. How do you help people get over that like hesitancy about using AI and really kind of start seeing the value of it?
Yeah, it's hard. So lawyers are really risk averse. Academia is really risk averse, and you stack those two on top of each other, you have very risk averse academia. It's a big lift, I would say, but a lot of that's literacy. So when you talk about the tools, you have to explain their cybersecurity profile. You have to say, explain the data protections. We're back to reading terms of service. And so I will take people to terms of service. Say, look, they're not trading on my content. They're not, giving them all that reassurance, explaining the difference between local AI versus calling it through the API. So there's a kind of AI literacy component to it, but there's also just like a brute force rep component to it as well, which is in my class, we use it for every assignment, every homework in class several times each time. And the idea with that is you start to get these reps at it and you build out that intuition of when it's good at a thing, when it's bad at a thing. And that really helps people too, because a lot of people, tried ChatGPT 2 years ago, which is crazy, 2024. And they went, I didn't do the thing that I wanted. And they kind of put it down. And so what I try to do is just reps. And that all comes from my wife. I, early on in this thing, came home and I was like, Tina, this is going to change everything. It's going to change practice. She's a stockbroker. It's going to change, tech trading for you and everything. And at a certain point, she was just like, shut up. I don't want to hear about ChatGPT anymore. And so one day she came to me because I'm IT for our house. And she's like, I need to make a macro in Excel. And I was like, watch this. It's like, put it in, catch, of course, it immediately knocked it out perfectly across all of her sheets. And she's like, whoa. And so that was kind of the breakthrough moment for her. And what I realized then was everybody has to have that little light bulb moment. And the way you brute force it is like tons of reps.
And you mentioned vibe coding. You talked about, some of the tools that you've been making personally, but I've also heard you talk about the fact that, there are campus tools, the AI tools that you could build that could be, built in-house as opposed to purchasing. So when do you decide to pursue that, when to try to vibe code a solution, or where should institutions think about not just purchasing something off the shelf versus buying or building?
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously data security, if you're dealing with FERPA stuff, that's actually, it kind of cuts both ways. So there are instances where data security becomes something where you need to vibe code something locally and privately so you can keep it local and private. And you need to spin up your own Llama server or Mac Mini or whatever you're going to use. But I think there's also, instances where we had there was a very unique flow to the way that they did course assignments at OU when I used to work there, where they would assign which course goes into which room for the semester. And they looked out on the market and they didn't see anything. They saw one kind of option that sort of fit, but it was like 15 grand. And it was sort of like they would have to do a lot with it to get it to that point. And I was like, let me just try to vibe code that in-house. And that's like, not really private data and not a big deal. You could anonymize the data, would have been fine. And so in that instance, it was worth it for me to spend, an afternoon vibe coding something that the head of admissions could use to, create the solution. So part of that is an expertise gap. You have to have the person in-house that can actually vibe code a solution, end to end. But, the other instance is just like, there's nothing out there that's going to do this thing. We have to build it. And, previously what that would have looked like is the law school or, institution contracts with an outside software development team, and you get their team of developers. And like now that's less and less and less every single day if you have people in-house who have these tools. And they're getting so intuitive and so kind of one-shotty, for lack of a better expression. I anticipate we're just going to have kind of a vibe coding team kind of everywhere. In law, we would call that, that place like AI ops or legal ops. And it would be really interesting, I think, if kind of every campus at some point had a version of that, of people that are just like, hey, you need a kind of one-off software thing for just one short, one solution. Let me just build out for you right now today or whatever. And then we'll just move on to the next project.
It's amazing to be able to figure out very quickly how to spin something up for your particular problem with all of the, nuances that your individual unit faces, and not have to, pay for a custom solution or get something off the shelf that does like a million things plus the one thing that you needed to do at a much higher
your
cost.
users, that's the other thing. It's like you
Right?
intimately know your users. So you can say like, this person would use it in that way. This person would use it in this way. And you can build that into it. So, there is an element of this where you're really making, the analogy I always make is like, it's like a Chipotle burrito software. It's how much guac do you want, kind of thing. And you really can do that now. So it's really liberating. And for me, I love it. I'm super into it. It's fun to do. I know not everyone feels that way when they're sitting at a terminal or, even in like a VS Code type thing, but I genuinely enjoy it. It's fun.
I mean, there's tools like Claude Code out there that make it so conversational that you don't see it really as coding, and those people who are anti coding or don't want to look at code, can do a lot without actually diving into it.
Absolutely.
You're at ASU Law, and it explicitly lets you use AI within the admissions process, which I know a lot of institutions are very hesitant to do. So, what does that process look like, and how do you deal with the potential risks around, like, equity or bias, inclusion, all those sorts of things, and how is admissions trying to like measure and offset some of those?
I don't, I haven't asked them specifically like how they tried to measure an offset. I'd have to ask the admissions team, but I think there's kind of a few things there, which is like, number one, there is a sort of deterministic component to this, which is like, how are you going to stop them? Whether
Right.
you have a policy in place or not, I guarantee that these students are doing it. Then there's another thing, which is like, what were we measuring with admissions in the first place? Because a lot of people will go pay for, some contractor to review their admissions application. So is it really measuring anything anyways? And then now this is, what ASU sees it as is this is just where we're at now. This is a platform change, steering agents, interacting with these types of AI tools is where we are at. And so we're meeting the user base at that level. The bigger, I think, philosophical question is like, what were we trying to measure with the admissions application essay in the first place? And if you're measuring the ideas of the person, then maybe this could still do a pretty good job. If you were measuring their writing ability, probably not, it doesn't. So it's just that, hey, this is where it's at. We need to come to reality, meet reality on reality's terms. And there, are equitable reasons why you would do this as well. So, all of a sudden the playing field is completely level. The rich kid that can afford the tutor and the whatever that, the person to punch up their essay, that's irrelevant now because everybody can do it. So there is that too.
Just thinking about watching how admissions is making that change, and, how we're integrating AI into the classrooms, and realizing that all of these outdated old methods that we've traditionally used to evaluate learning, to evaluate the applications process, all need to be rethought in this new landscape, this new era of AI.
Still 100% on that. I think, one thing that, the chat GPT revolution or LLM revolution did was just make us realize like it just broke everything overnight. Like the analogy that I read in an essay one time was it's as if all of a sudden everybody got x-ray glasses overnight. And we have all these private, my office has a wall and a door anticipating that nobody has x-ray glasses. And it really did that. So the take-home essay is dead. A lot of ways measured students in law school. Take-home essay, law journal article, quiz, a Canvas quiz. All that stuff's all dead. And it's just completely broken overnight. And it requires, thoughtful redesign. And it's really hard to take an entire big institution and people who have the protection of tenure and academic freedom, which I would love to have. I'm not saying either of those are bad, but to get them to take this seriously, completely reevaluate stuff. And it's a heavy lift. It's expensive. It's time consuming. So it just broke a lot of stuff very quickly.
Yeah, and I think we're just beginning to see like what it is breaking, like the idea of higher education as a vehicle for knowledge transfer.
Yep.
I think knowledge transfer is not going to be a differentiator anymore, because AI can do knowledge transfer so well. So why are you teaching people to regurgitate knowledge that they have at the, tips of their finger on demand? So what do we really need to be teaching them,
100%, 100%. And it requires a lot of thinking. And as we were talking about before the podcast, like this is just a place where it's like, it's hard to get a massive institution to redirect and take all of this stuff seriously, especially, the people at the top of the institution generally have been doing the thing for 30 years. And in their mind, they have an idea of what success looks like. And they're potentially out the door pretty soon. So they're like, I don't want to make these big structural, that sounds like a lot of work. So it's hard. It's hard. There are places that are doing it. I'm not saying it's everywhere, but yes, it is. It's a big, big ask.
Yeah, and oftentimes those people in charge are not the people that are experimenting and exploring with these tools,
Right.
and they don't understand them. So that's even more reason for them not to lean into them.
That's right. That's right.
Speaking about not understanding things, a lot of institutions don't have any sort of, guidelines or recommendations or guardrails when people start using AI. They don't have any approved tools. So what, invariably happens is the people are just using their own versions of ChatGPT to get ahead, with no understanding of what they should or shouldn't be putting into these tools. So that's really that shadow AI. And that's a institutional risk with
Oh
people
yeah.
using these tools without any idea of how their data is being shared or stored. What does a safe, space for experimentation look like?
This is an area where I think I just crow about ASU over and over again, but they did a really good job. So they're the first campus, I think, to get ChatGPT EDU. They have a service internally. It's called ASU AI Creator, I think is the name of the service. And essentially what they do is they have local GPUs and local servers, and they recreated, what ChatGPT or Claude looks like. And you can do all the same stuff. You can build your little projects, your custom GPTs. You can call different models. They've actually enhanced it so you can actually like dial in a vector store with it. They have a scraping service that they do. Firecrawl is embedded into it. You can put in different file types. So I have like for my class, so I have the transcripts of because it's all recorded, and I have the audio files. I put all of that into the brain of one of those. I put my syllabus, all the information, handouts, all that stuff, my PowerPoints, all into it. And essentially what I've got is like a little AITA. And it was something that initially I was like, I don't know if students are going to use it, care about this. Almost every student has used it and has over 500 interactions. So it's something that's and it's all safe. So even if they put HIPAA, FERPA, whatever into it, it's all on campus locally. It's all private. So I think, you have to act fast and get them the tools. Otherwise, they're going to go find something different. And when I say the tools, it has to be pretty close to what the frontier models are offering. I talk to a lot of young attorneys who are at firms. They're not leaning into this stuff. And they'll go, yeah, they gave us, insert X. I won't, defame any products here. They gave us insert X. It's substantially lower quality than what the frontier models are offering. And so while, yes, we have quote unquote AI, it just doesn't do any of the good stuff. You have to get them the tools so they can use them. Otherwise, they're just going to go around you. And I mean, the number of attorneys, faculty that I've talked to that come to work, activate their hotspot on their phone, and use their personal computer is just unbelievable.
Yeah, because they can accelerate everything that they need to do, but
That's
they
right.
can't do it with their institutional accounts. So
That's right. That's right.
so many institutions that I work with are like, oh yeah, we've got our own on-site model, but it does it just allows you to upload files, or it just does, it doesn't have that full functionality. And you really need like a dedicated team that's going to be able to work with, developing that tool into some sort of simulation of what all the frontier models are doing, just so you can keep up with it.
100%. I call it the whitelisted ChatGPT problem. Like when I go to I see a big firm or something, and they go, "We have ChatGPT, we have Claude." I'm like, "Really? That's pretty forward thinking. It's amazing." And then I look, and it's like, it's just a chat box where you can select the different model through the API, but it's still the same 2024, 2023 cut and paste, maybe upload 5 to 10 files type interaction with it. That's not what's going on when you spin up Claude Cowork, when you use the agent mode in ChatGPT. I mean, those are actually a lot closer to what they promised us in 2023, 2024. This little personal assistant that lives in the cloud that can do all this cool stuff where you interact with your files. That's a 2-year-old technology, which in AI terms is 5-10-year-old technology. That's maybe a little bit of an AI literacy problem, where people are mistaking that for the exact same thing because that's how they use the tools. But that's not the current state of the frontier models right now. And there's every week shipping some new cool thing that helps people and blah blah blah. And that's kind of that kind of environment is how we need to get to in all these academic institutions.
Yeah, absolutely. But, limited resources, limited budget,
Yeah,
limited headcount, and people
right.
already have their budgets already planned for the next, fiscal
That's right.
year. And they're not going to go back and say, oh, we need to look at AI, have some sense of urgency around this. They're just like, well, let's just wait till next year's
Yeah.
budget and then we'll look at it.
Yep. It's this big kind of bloated, behemoth, and you're trying to redirect it, at the speed of AI, and it's very challenging. So I'm not unsympathetic to it. I'm just saying, if you want to keep that shadow IT, at bay, that's the way you're going to have to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we see so many AI initiatives and AI projects stall in universities, right? In higher ed. What do you think are some of the key factors, and what sort of I don't know, AI translator does the institution need to be able to really move forward successfully with these integrations?
So one thing that I have noticed that is a huge gap is the training. I can compare it to lawyers in law and law schools, which is we usually sit in one of 2 or 3 legal research services. So it'd be Westlaw, Lexis, or now Vincent AI, VLEX, Clio. We used to be able to go in about once a year, do a training, up our, kind of upskill, know all the latest features and like, whistles and bells. And then we could kind of deck out for basically the next year and generally know how to use the platform. This stuff is happening so fast that what we need to do is have very frequent trainings that are shorter and not burdensome. So something like, at least once a month, a 15 to half hour, something where, and it's mandatory. Everyone has to level set. We all kind of understand this stuff. And it's not a burden. It's not something, like the fire safety training and sexual harassment training. That's like, I guess spend an hour going through, something that's quick and kind of pleasant. And then there also has to be incentives for using this stuff. Because right now, when, generally when people ask me to come speak at stuff, it's in the context of, we're looking for somebody who, wants to use the tools, is fairly optimistic about the tools. And what is, there's tons of people doing is, hey, these are the ethical guidelines. This is your case is going to get hallucinated in law. And so there's this like persistent kind of negativity. It's very risky. These things are very dangerous. You have to have some sort of incentive to be like, hey, great job. This person used the AI for this. And we're seeing you, even if it's like low-level staff member who did a really cool thing, we're going to find some way to incentivize that stuff and make it exciting so that it's like people are interested in it,
Yeah, and even celebrating the loss, the losses, I think, are super critical because you learn so much. You're like, yeah, this prompt was horrible. Why? What did we do? How can we improve it? And being like, we thought that this was going to be the ultimate solution, but it
I
wasn't.
like that
Why
too.
not?
That's
Right?
good. Yeah.
We talk a lot about prompting and how important it is to understand like why your output is bad, right? No, most of the time it's the prompt or you're not giving it enough information. We know like hallucinations and sycophancy, those sorts of things also exist. How should leaders in higher ed think about the importance of like teaching prompt design as part of governance and not just as like another skill that you expect your users to figure out on their own?
It is. So it's a weird thing because it's all natural language and these things are actually pretty good on average at understanding what we want them to do, even with really bad prompts. People overestimate their ability to prompt. That was a presentation that I frequently do around is I made a prompting app. And what it does is it has a rubric based on all of the frontier models guidance. And it gives you a legal scenario in my instance, because that's generally how I present to you. And then it calls the Claude API and it actually grades each person's prompt against the rubric based on the scenario and gives them kind of a score, feedback, things they did well, things they did poorly. And it's like, that's really what you need is some sort of feedback mechanism to say, hey, your prompts are generally bad and because here's why. I mean, a lot of that, you can fix with the AI literacy, frequent training piece where you're like giving them tips about prompting, put it in Markdown if it's a big lump, things like that. I think it's a big deal specifically because everyone thinks they're good at it. And frequently I see people are just terrible at it. In the legal context, it ends up being a really, really big deal because we're worried that prompts are discoverable they are discoverable in a civil context. So there is this concern that if I put something into the prompt that is later going to surface in litigation, cause liability, make me look foolish, something like that. And so that's how we can motivate them in a legal setting. In an academic setting, it's a little bit harder, because generally they just prompt into the void and you never see it or anything like that. Training is a big part of it. And then some sort of mechanism where you're like, they're seeing the light of day or being graded by something, even if it's anonymously through the API, so that they can actually get feedback on the thing. Because what I generally see when I see a prompting workshop is somebody stands up, they got some slides, they go through a handful of frameworks, but the user doesn't actually get any reps and any meaningful feedback. So I think that's probably a big part of it.
It's so funny because once you see a framework and internalize it and you start using it, then it's like you can't get it out of your head. Like every time I go into do a prompt, I just flip right into this, like, the race framework or the crit framework, all these different
Right.
frameworks. I'm like, this is the problem I have. This is the best way for me to figure out how to solve it. But you see so many of these frameworks, you're not going to remember all of them until you start using that one.
Yeah. And you're right. It always ends up being a big unlock whenever you do one of those things because you're like, oh my gosh, this was so much more useful than it ever was before. That's another thing where it's hard because everything's changing so rapidly. So like the way you would prompt the guidance around a reasoning model, now it's still all generally kind of, if you did 1, 2 years ago, it's probably still fine, but it does change. And there are ways, so that's another one where it's just moving so fast.
Right. Yeah. And you would talk a lot about like, guidelines and policies and you've mentioned a couple of times like soft law, like perhaps as kind of a dominant form of AI governance. Why do you like that better than, like an operating model or policies for universities or for universities that are waiting for, state or federal regulations that are going to, tell them how they should use these tools?
Yeah, it's because especially at like a university like ours, we have a school of applied AI engineering, we have a law school, we have an English department, all the staff and administrators in between all of that, and they're all using it completely differently. So if you go to somebody from the applied AI engineering department, they're very sophisticated, and you can trust them to use very quote unquote dangerous applications of this in a very sophisticated manner and protect what they're doing and also accelerate, which is, that's part of the mission. You want them building stuff. At the law school, we generally have pretty good training around things like cybersecurity because that's a really big deal at law firms. Now, maybe the English department, maybe they don't get that type of training. And so you would have to have some more, guardrails and policies. But I think just because it's so different how everybody is using the thing, I generally, defer to kind of the lowest level unit to decide how they can use the thing. And then, obviously you'd have to have certain policies in place, like we can't put FERPA data into these types of models. So there is just a kind of global literacy element to it, but that training trickles down. You train at the top level and make sure that the next level receives this training. I don't understand why we do a cybersecurity training, a fireplace training, all these trainings, and there hasn't been a single AI training that we've done after all these years. And it like you could cover a lot of like the worst case scenario, catastrophic outcomes with a half hour one of those for the entire university, and then your applied AI engineering department doesn't have to go through 6 months of IT security clearance in order to get access to the latest and greatest tool so that they can start, building. So yeah, I'm in favor of that just because I know how universities generally, how slowly they move with this type of thing. I've seen what happens when you try to centralize this stuff to the very top, and it just ends up being very low resolution. You have to have all these exceptions to exceptions. Those take forever. The stuff just moves too fast.
Local department committees or like role committees, so like
Yeah.
marketing should have guidelines for the university to follow across everybody that does marketing, so the use cases, what works and what doesn't work, but you can't put it in policies because they take way too long to change. The technology is moving way too fast.
You got to get your
um,
committee together.
right. Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of difference when you're using these tools between just making your current workflows more efficient, right? And making your current job faster versus like real innovation where you're actually thinking about better ways to accomplish your goal that may entirely scrap the old,
Yeah.
workflows and processes. What do you think it is that separates a campus from, who's just looking to speed up, individual processes versus one who is actually thinking about like reshaping the way that they do their work?
The big differentiator that I've seen over and over again is just investment, both time and money. So that obviously is a huge one. But also, it's a lot to ask people to say, hey, we're going to reevaluate this entire workflow from a design thinking perspective, lean on those kind of MBA type skills to evaluate process improvement. And that's really where I've seen the best results, though, is, a lot of the times when people say, like, hey, we want to speed this thing up and how can we use AI? And it's usually in the context of like, what little app can I buy to just throw in the mix? And frequently it's not even that AI is the solution. It's just, bringing practices up to 2026, your data practices, your data governance, getting the process so it's more efficient, interviewing stakeholders, that's a big part of design thinking. So I think that is really the big one where you just go, we have to really think of, from the moment this, email hits our inbox and it has to get to whomever or whatever, what are all those steps? How can we reevaluate that process, plug in AI where it's appropriate, an agent, whatever, where it's appropriate? That's the part that I think, takes not even as much the money investment, but the time investment from people, because you have to get everyone together, have like a full day workshop, get the Post-its out, put them on the wall or whatever, however you do it, and that's a big part of it, is just taking that time, building that into, whatever your innovation plan is.
We're in this strange time right now where best practices are no longer best practices because there are different ways to do things.
Yeah. And we've seen a lot of really cool innovation as a result of that. So, I've said it before, I'll say it again. People have been saying the buzzword disruptive technology for this is disruptive. It's disruptive technology. This is truly disruptive for, a decade or two, it feels like, in academia. And this is truly a disruptive technology. And it's going to come with good parts and bad parts. We are all hoping that the good parts outweigh the bad parts. I'm fairly optimistic, feeling good about it, depending on what day you get me. But it's truly disruptive, and so you need to act like this is to some degree existential to certain parts of the university and certain types of work. And so I think you can move those people around and they can do other things. But if you're going to lean into this technology 100% and be innovative and be future thinking, we're not going to do things the way that we used to. It's just not going to survive making contact with this technology.
And I think we shouldn't be doing things the way we always have been.
Yeah, there are a lot of things that even like humans shouldn't have been doing. A lot of this like grunt work. Like I think about I had a job where I used to work at an accounting firm, and I would literally sit all day and just pound numbers. I was just a data entry guy. Data entry, chunk, 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 chunk. Nobody should have to do that. I had a college degree.
You're not learning anything.
Well, and I was thankful for the job, and it was a nice work environment, whatever. But that's just not something that I think humans should be doing. And so, to the extent that we can automate away that type of just drudgery, I think it's a net positive. It's where do we take those people? How do we put them in better roles? How do we expand our reach? How do we, do more things and more interesting things, I think.
One of the last questions I always finish with is what is the number one use case for you that helps you the most, either in your personal or professional life?
I would say, so Claude Cowork was recently a big unlock for me, simply because it's just so fast to get something done that I would have had to go to Claude. It's, it's just in an interface that's really easy to interact with. And I can make all these little custom skills that do all the Sean stuff, very well. So that was, having just that was a big unlock. But and the development side, I mean, just the agents have just gotten so good now. So good, where, there's many instances where I will come up with an idea, carefully think through, a really long prompt, and usually entire PR and product PRD, product map, all those things, put it out there, and it will just in one shot be, frequently either 95% of the way there, or sometimes it's basically done. And that has been like, whoa. And that's really like Claude Code kind of came out, I don't know, a little over a year ago or something like that. But the number of agentic steps it could take just hadn't reached where it could just full stack app on, I use Vercel to host a lot of my stuff. I mean, that has really just absolutely blown my mind recently. And as a result of that, now the barrier to making just completely custom software for one-off uses is just very, very low. And so that's been a huge change for me.
Yeah. I mean, I've switched my mindset. Instead of trying to think about like how to use an existing tool to solve problems, now I'm thinking about what problems can I solve? Yeah. And then I'll just build a tool to fix that.
It is. And it's, that's really like empowering and liberating. And that's why I love it so much. And it doesn't always work. There are a lot of failures, but you learn something on the failures, and it's usually kind of funny sometimes. I don't know. I like it.
Awesome. Well, can't thank you enough for coming on the show. If our users want to get in touch with you, where's the best place for them to do that?
Yeah, you can find me on ASU's web space, Sean A. Harrington, or sean.harrington@asu.edu. I love talking about this stuff. Please reach out.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for your time and for sharing all your insights.
Great questions.
What a fun conversation. Sean brings such a practical, no-nonsense perspective to a space that can sometimes get bogged down in caution and bureaucracy. I loved his analogy about AI giving everyone X-ray glasses overnight. All of our systems and processes were built assuming that no one could see through the walls, and now they can. That's why the take-home essay is dead, why admissions applications need rethinking, and why so many of our traditional methods for evaluating learning are fundamentally broken. His point about the whitelisted ChatGPT problem really hit home. Institutions think that they've provided AI access because they gave people a basic chat interface, and these are falling farther behind every day. If you're not giving your people tools that are close to the frontier models, they're going to activate their hotspots and use their personal devices. Shadow AI is a real institutional risk, and the only way to get ahead of it is to give people the tools they actually need. I also think his ideas around training are critical. Short, frequent, mandatory sessions rather than annual marathons. Combine those with incentives for people who find innovative use cases, and celebrate the failures, not just the wins, because the failures are where the real learning happens. His framework for thinking about when to build versus buy is something every institution should consider. If you have someone who can vibe code, the barrier to creating custom software for one-off internal problems is incredibly low right now. Sean's vision of every campus having a vibe coding team that can spin up solutions on demand is where we're headed, and the institutions that get there first are going to have an advantage. Please reach out to me with unique ways that you're integrating AI into your professional and personal lives. And as always, blue skies and keep creating.